For 2,000 years, engineers have looked at a narrow strip of water in the Mediterranean and walked away terrified. The Romans wanted to build a bridge here. Charlemagne wanted to build a bridge here. But for 20 centuries, the Strait of Messina has remained unconquered. A 3-kilometer gap that separates the massive island of Sicily from the rest of Europe. It is the only thing standing between an isolated economy and the future. But in August 2025, the Italian government did something historic. They didn't just propose a bridge, they officially approved the plans for a €15.5 billion megaproject. They signed off on what would be the longest single-span suspension bridge in human history. If they pull this off, it will be the largest infrastructure project in the Western world. It would rewrite the rules of modern engineering. But there is a reason this bridge hasn't been built since the days of the Caesars. The Strait of Messina isn't just a body of water, it is a geological death trap. And right now, even with the approval signed, the project is already frozen. The question isn't just, can we build it? It's, should we? To understand the sheer magnitude of this decision, you have to look beyond the blueprints and look at the daily reality of southern Italy. Sicily is not a remote outpost. It is a cultural giant and an agricultural powerhouse. Yet economically, it is an island under siege by its own geography. Right now, the strait serves as a massive brake on the Italian economy. Every single day, thousands of cars, trucks carrying produce, and tourists line up at the water's edge. The process is a logistical nightmare. Trains, heavy passenger trains, have to be physically disassembled, shunted onto specialized ferries, floated across the water, and then reassembled on the other side. It is a slow, grinding ritual that adds hours to travel time and bleeds millions of euros in lost productivity every year. The dream of the bridge is to erase that friction instantly. The plan is a seamless, direct link, a massive 6-lane highway and a central railway track. The goal is to allow a high-speed train to shoot from Rome to Palermo without ever touching the brakes, transforming a journey that currently takes all day into a matter of hours. The government estimates this connection will unlock 120,000 new jobs per year. It is pitched as the ultimate stimulus package, a way to finally bridge the economic gap between the wealthy north and the struggling south. On paper, it is the perfect solution. But when you take that perfect solution and try to place it on the actual map, reality starts to push back. Let's talk about the scale, because big doesn't quite cover it. To span the Strait of Messina, engineers face a restriction that ties their hands completely. The water is too deep, and the shipping lanes are too vital to the Mediterranean economy to put support pillars in the middle. You cannot build a causeway. You cannot build a multi-span bridge like the one over the Florida Keys. You have to jump the entire distance in one go. This requires a single span of 300 meters. To put that in perspective, the Golden Gate Bridge has a main span of about 1,280 meters. The current world record holder, the 1915 Çanakkale Bridge in Turkey, spans 2,023 meters. The Messina Bridge wouldn't just beat the record, it would shatter it by over 60%. In engineering, difficulty doesn't scale linearly. When you double the length of a bridge, you don't just double the weight or the cost. You exponentially increase the forces acting on the structure. The cables required to hold this deck up would need to be over a meter thick, composed of tens of thousands of individual steel wires under tension loads that are difficult to even simulate. But the challenge of gravity is nothing compared to the challenge of the environment. The engineers who designed this project have identified 5 distinct boss fights, 5 catastrophic risks that exist simultaneously in this one narrow strip of water. The first challenge is seismic, and it is terrifying. The Strait of Messina sits directly on top of a major tectonic fault line where the African and Eurasian plates grind against each other. This isn't theoretical danger. In 1908, this exact location was the epicenter of one of the deadliest earthquakes in European history, a 7.1 magnitude shock that leveled the cities of Messina and Reggio Calabria and killed over 75,000 people. Building the largest structure in history on top of the grave of the 1908 earthquake seems like madness to many. The engineering requirement is a paradox. The bridge must be rigid enough to carry heavy freight trains without bending, but it must also be flexible enough to dance with a massive earthquake without snapping. The towers, which will be taller than the Eiffel Tower, have to remain standing even as the ground beneath them moves violently in different Directions. Then there is the water. The ancients wrote about this place. In Greek mythology, this strait was the home of Scylla and Charybdis, two sea monsters that destroyed ships. Today we know those monsters are actually the currents. Because the Tyrrhenian Sea and the Ionian Sea have different tides, water rushes through this narrow gap at speeds of up to 6 knots. That might not sound fast for a car, but for water, it is a torrent. It creates whirlpools and vertical currents that can drag equipment down. For construction crews trying to anchor the massive foundations on the seabed, the strait is a hostile, chaotic work zone that fights you every inch of the way. If the earth and water don't get you, the air will. The geography of the surrounding mountains creates a funnel effect, accelerating winds through the strait. For a suspension bridge, wind is the ultimate enemy. The nightmare scenario for any engineer is aeroelastic flutter. This is the phenomenon that destroyed the Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 1940, where the wind caused the bridge to twist and vibrate until it tore itself apart. With a span of 3.3 kilometers, the Messina Bridge acts like a gigantic sail. If the wind hits it broadside, the forces are immense. To solve this, the designers had to stop thinking of it as a bridge and start thinking of it as an airplane wing. The Messina-type deck design is revolutionary. It isn't a solid block of concrete. It is split into 3 separate sections, 2 for cars, 1 for trains, with gaps in between. These gaps allow the wind to pass through the bridge rather than pushing against it. It disrupts the vortices that cause flutter. Essentially, the bridge is designed to be transparent to the wind. And finally, the 5th challenge, the life that moves through the air. The strait is a critical bottleneck for migration. Millions of birds, including protected raptors and storks, use this exact route to cross between Europe and Africa. Environmental. Groups argue that placing a web of steel cables and lit towers right in their flight path is an ecological crime. The legal battles over the environmental impact assessments are just as complex as the engineering, creating a wall of bureaucracy that has stopped the project as effectively as any earthquake. Despite these 5 massive hurdles, the proponents of the project, the Pontists, argue that we are ready. They look at the recent success of mega bridges in Turkey and Japan and say, the technology exists. We can dampen the seismic waves. We can split the wind. We can manage the currents. They argue that the bridge is safe. But in Italy, the biggest danger to a project is rarely engineering. It is politics. The Messina Bridge has become a legendary yo-yo project. It was serious in the 90s. It was approved in the early 2000s. It was canceled in 2006. It was revived in 2009. It was canceled again in 2013. And now, in 2025, it is back. This constant starting and stopping creates deep skepticism. Locals in Sicily have heard these promises for 60 years. They see the bridge not as a piece of infrastructure, but as a political tool used to win votes and then discarded. There are also darker fears. Critics, including anti-mafia prosecutors, have raised concerns that a project with a budget of 15 billion euros is a magnet for organized crime infiltration. Managing the money is harder than pouring the concrete. And that brings us to today. The headlines say approved, but the reality on the ground is paused. Although the decree was signed in August 2025, the heavy machinery is silent. The project is currently undergoing a rigorous review by Italy's Court of Auditors. They are crunching the numbers to see if the financial model, which relies heavily on tolls and state funding, actually works, or if this will become a debt trap for generations. The timeline says completion by 2032 or 2033. But in the world of megaprojects, dates are just suggestions. So the Strait of Messina remains today what it has always been, a barrier. The ferries still run, the trains still decouple, and the fault lines still tremble quietly under the sea. The bridge is closer to reality than it has ever been, but it still has to cross the most difficult gap of all, the gap between a political promise and a finished reality. If it is built, the Strait of Messina Bridge will be a triumph of human will over nature. It will be a cathedral of steel, standing in the middle of the sea, proving that we can connect even the most divided lands. But if it fails, or if it is canceled again, it will remain a ghost story. A warning that some places on Earth simply do not want to be tamed. I want to turn this over to you. Do you think the economic benefits of connecting Sicily justify the immense risks of building on a fault line? Or is this 15 billion euros that could be better spent elsewhere? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the impossible engineering of the modern world, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.